So there was some vaccine hope today, which is great. But there's also a lot of vaccine confusion, which is not so great. Ontario today revealed that it will receive its first doses of vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna in the early part of 2021. Check this out.
We are expecting that we will receive shipments from both Pfizer and Moderna. There are significant issues with respect to the Pfizer vaccine in particular. It needs to be stored at minus 75 degrees Celsius and Moderna minus 20. The doses for Canada, we expect to receive 4 million doses between January and March of the Pfizer vaccine, 2 million for Moderna, of which we anticipate that we will receive 1,600,000 of Pfizer and 800,000 of Moderna. People do have to receive two doses 21 days apart. This is a major logistical challenge, but we have an entire group within the Ministry of Health right now that are planning for that.
Okay, that's pretty specific. The doses for Canada, the doses for Ontario, the 2 doses, the storage issues, the logistical challenge. So that is the Ontario Minister of Health, Christine Elliott, giving timelines and specifics about when you could get a vaccine. So, of course, that prompted MPs in question period in Ottawa to ask the federal health minister the same questions, but she refused to confirm those details. What happened at question today? Well, check this out.
In terms of distribution, we will work out with provinces and territories as we have with other things like personal protective equipment, rapid tests, a ratio or sharing approach that will work to ensure that all Canadians have access to viable and safe vaccines.
Okay, so no details there. Why isn't there a level of detail from the federal government on the vaccine rollout when the provinces are clearly giving that? Let's bring in MPs to discuss all that. Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health, Darren Fisher, joins us. Conservative health critic Michelle Rempel Garner joins us. And NDP health critic Don Davies is also here. Great to have all of you here. I think we've got Mr. Fisher. You know, guys,
just came in.
I think we got him. Ms. Fisher, let me just start with you. Minister Elliott in Ontario gave a detailed timeline of early vaccine procurement today. She said Ontario is expecting 1.6 million doses from Pfizer, 800,000 from Moderna. Why can't the federal government confirm those numbers? And if so, can you give us any more details?
Well, we don't. First of all, thank you very much for having me. We don't have an approved vaccine yet. We do have lots of contracts with lots of potential vaccine manufacturers and developers, and things look very good. We are very optimistic that we will have something, in the early part, hopefully early to mid part of 2021. However, it's very difficult to, you don't want politicians doing the rollout. You want science and evidence-based rollouts, and we are doing the work, and we are looking at every possibility for a successful rollout to ensure that we can get Canadians vaccinated.
But, sir, I'm just trying to figure this out because you're supposed to be coordinating with the provinces on the vaccines because the federal government is the ones that are procuring it. So I'm just going to ask you again. Ontario gave a detailed analysis, 4 million. We all know, and Christine Elliott was clear as well, this is subject to the approval from Health Canada. But once it's approved, once there's the green light, how can the province of Ontario give specific numbers and the federal government can't? Why is there a disconnect?
Well, again, like the minister said this afternoon, we'll continue to work with the provinces and territories to ensure that they have what they need when they need it, as soon as it becomes available. And, we've worked with them well from the start. And that I don't see that relationship changing. I see that relationship growing. We'll take lots of advice from NACI and some of the science and evidence-based groups out there that would help us develop a rollout that will ensure, like I say, the Canadians get the vaccines that they need when they become available. And that rollout may be different depending on the vaccine that is approved first.
I get it. So I'm just going to press, before I go to the opposition, I just have to press one last time. Is Christine Elliott wrong then? Or is that what the federal government is saying? You don't stand by her numbers and we should not believe the health minister of Ontario?
I'm not aware of where she got her numbers. I'm not sure what provinces have for possible numbers that might come forward, depending on which contract yields a successful and approved by Health Canada that is safe for Canadians vaccine.
Okay, you don't know where the Minister of Health got fundamental numbers. that, to be honest, that's a bit stunning. I'm going to go to Michelle Rempel. The government, to be fair to the government, they have a lot of vaccines and they're not approved yet. I totally appreciate that. But there seems to be a wild disconnect between what Ontario is saying and what the federal government. What does that tell you, Michelle Rempel?
Oh, I mean, this guy is paid to have this information for Canadians, and he can't give it to you on his show. And it just goes to show how behind the federal government has been in these issues. Let's talk about the influenza vaccine this year. The federal government did not procure enough doses for a basic vaccine that we get every year. In fact, Ontarians have not had full access to influenza vaccines. So now we're talking about a COVID vaccine that, as Minister Elliott mentioned, has distribution challenges. The federal government has a role to play in giving direction to their bureaucrats. That's the job of ministers. If we don't need them, then my colleague needs to say that he doesn't need a job. But their job is to give direction to bureaucrats and say, we need a plan. We need a plan to distribute these vaccines. And then they need to be transparent to Canadians about this so that epidemiologists, immunologists can validate whether or not it is viable. And that also we can have a discussion about the ethics of who gets the vaccine and in what order. This is information that should be available to the Canadian public well in advance of any vaccine being distributed across the country so that we can educate Canadians about that and we can assure Canadians that there is a sound plan. This week, the federal government was all over the map on this. They wouldn't answer questions about a distribution plan. Then they started talking about potentially using the Canadian Armed Forces, deploying them on the vaccine, not taking into consideration things like Minister Elliott talked about with regard to some of the temperature storage issues that have been encountered.
The storage issues,
yeah. It's highly concerning. So we will continue to press the government for this plan, and it's incumbent upon them to do their jobs and present that to the Canadian public in a transparent and timely manner.
Let me go over to Don Davies. Don Davies, just two things. I'll go back to Mr. Fisher about if there's going to be a plan just on the transparency side. I know, listen, we all appreciate nothing's been approved yet. But, Mr. Davies, what do you make of the fact that Ontario seems to have a lot of details and the federal government saying we don't know where she got those details?
Well, it's completely puzzling. And, those were very specific numbers and manufacturers that the Ontario Health Minister was talking about today. She said 4 million doses from Pfizer, 2 million from Moderna. She even specified how many doses of those would go to Ontario and how many to the rest of the country. That didn't sound like she's making things up. So it leads to I think, a fundamental question about what's going on. Why are we in Parliament hearing from a provincial health minister what the national reception of COVID vaccines are going to be and in what numbers and how they'll be distributed? I have to say that other than bland assurances and vague generalities, that's all I've heard from the Minister of Health and from this government for months and months and months. And look, there is no issue more important to Canadians right now, none, than a vaccine. It's what they are depending on to get their health back protected. It's what they're counting on to get our economy back to some sense of normalcy. And yet, as was pointed out, we still haven't had a plan about where we're getting these vaccines, how they're going to be distributed, who's distributing them. I met with pharmacists on the weekend, and they've been telling me they've not been consulted by this government. And one would think that the pharmacies of this country would be key players in terms of inoculating the millions of Canadians that are going to happen when a vaccine comes. So I'm sorry, but Mr. Fisher's answers are not good enough.
Well, let me go back to you, Mr. Fisher. The opposition, a bit surprised, or more than a bit surprised by the confusion. Just a straight answer. Will the federal government reveal a rollout plan, a distribution plan? When, how many, who gets it? All those fundamental things. How will it be distributed? When will that plan be rolled out? Because, again, according to Ontario, we're months away from this happening.
Vaccine is accepted and approved by Health Canada and is seen as being safe and effective for Canadians, the rollout will be made public.
That's too late.
Well, so
every
what?
Well, that's too late. I mean,
why the delay? Why not just tell us the plan to roll it out?
Yeah.
So the plan is we're looking at every opportunity. We must make sure that we have every stone turned to ensure that we have the best possible access, the prioritizing, everything has to be absolutely in place.
But cliches aren't going to cut it. We need to have a plan, and it needs to be developed now. I mean, if Ontario is talking about rolling this out in January, it's a few short weeks away. We should be scrutinizing the details of this. And if it's in the best interest of the Canadian public now, we should be educating the Canadian public now. We should be talking to pharmacists, the military, whoever now. And like, this is dangerous. I can't even believe what I'm hearing.
Mr. Davies, I want you to weigh in.
Well, I think this would really help if we had transparency. And I have to say, you know, we're 9 months into this this crisis, really, and there's been just a shocking lack of transparency. You know, even if you dig into the numbers a bit, Evan, Prime Minister Trudeau has said that he negotiated 20 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine. That's what he said. And we know it's a double vaccine. You need 10 and 10 million. Yet Ontario Health Minister Elliott today said that we're getting 4 million doses between January and March of this year. So where's the other 16 million doses? You know, we've been hearing reports that we're not actually getting the Pfizer vaccine until months after the US and the UK gets it. So this is why, you know, the Liberal government refused to release any of the contracts. And by the way, Brazil just released almost the entire AstraZeneca contract. Other countries are releasing them. Is it because this allows the Prime Minister and Liberals to just keep claiming they've got all these deals, but we don't know when the vaccines will be distributed, or whether it's a set number of doses, or whether it's up to a certain number of doses, never mind rollout. And I just want to say quickly, by now we know what the distribution protocol should be. We know it should be going to healthcare, frontline healthcare workers, vulnerable populations, seniors, etc. Why is that a state secret? Why is that not rolled out by now, pending the actual release of the vaccine?
I'm sure.
No reason that should be.
I'm sure it will follow the H1N1. But just, I'm going to go back to Mr. Fisher to answer this, but I want to get Michelle Rempel on the record, because we had the procurement minister, Anita Anand, on this program. And she had said, and by the way, Pfizer has also said, they're worried about a motion that you backed that could put risk making confidential contractual information on vaccines, and that could jeopardize getting access to vaccines. When you hear from the head of Pfizer and you hear from the government that this motion might actually jeopardize the speed at which we get a vaccine because they're concerned about confidential contractual information and IP, are you concerned about that? Are you willing to moderate that motion?
To me or to Mr. Fisher?
No, to you, Michelle Rempel.
Well, we've already expressed that we've invited the law clerk committee to talk about redactions, but let's go back to the issue that we've just spent 10 minutes debating. We have no transparency from this government on any of their plans. So Canadians deserve to have this information, and I don't buy into the hyperbole that the procurement minister, who has been extremely opaque, dangerously opaque, in procurement of things like personal protection equipment, vaccines, rapid tests, that somehow parliamentary scrutiny is not needed in this situation. I am fully confident.
Well, to be fair, it was also, I mean, to be fair, it was, we'll get Mr. Fisher on that. But the CEO of Pfizer also expressed that. The Minister
is right. We need transparency. Enough is enough.
Mr. Fisher, there's real concern. Go ahead, Mr. Fisher.
I heard you and Michelle talking at the same time. I didn't hear a question in there.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question.
It's important to know that when we pass our motion, it specifically allows redaction for contractual negotiations. So that is a ground upon which the government is entitled to withhold information from the contract. So that's why the concern of the head of Pfizer and Minister Anand is simply baseless, because they do have the ability to redact anything that would jeopardize their contractual relations. So it's a non-starter.
Okay, Mr. Fisher, I'm just going to ask you one last time, and the opposition is asking some pretty basic questions. I think the public. Ontario has released details about distribution. When this is happening, we could be weeks away. Can you give us any indication if the government has prepared a plan? If so, have you consulted with the pharmacies? Have you solved the storage issue? Can you give us any details as to when, who, and how this vaccine is going to be distributed on a federal level, sir?
The advanced guidelines, there's some guidelines were given by the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, and they have proposed some advanced guidelines on a rollout. And that is some of the things that we will be looking at. We have mentioned that we will consider utilizing the military if needed. The military have come in very handy at long-term care facilities. We will look at every option to ensure that when we get vaccines that are ready for distribution and approved by Health Canada, it's not too late to wait until health.
Now, this is crazy. This is crazy and irresponsible. We should be looking at this now. It should be public now. It's irresponsible.
I just want to hear Mr. Fisher. Hang on, go ahead, Mr. Fisher. Just finish that.
So again, the advanced guidance from the National Advisory Committee on Immunization will help guide how that rollout works, what it looks like. And, you know, when we don't have a vaccine that is approved yet, we will make sure that when we do have one that's approved by Health Canada and ready for rollout, we will utilize every opportunity. We've had Canadians' backs from day one, and that's not going to change. You know, Mr. Sir, it surprises me every day when I think that the conservative.
Like, this is just murder. I can't even believe this, that we're 4 months out from this being delivered, and they send some guy out here who has no clue what he's not talking about.
Let's not get personal. I'd just say, guys, I'm going to have to unfortunately leave there. But Mr. Fisher, if your government could please tell us and clarify at any time, and we'll broadcast it immediately, why you say you don't know where Christine Elliott, the Ontario Health Minister, got those specific numbers, and the federal government doesn't know. If you could tell us where she got them or you're disputing them, please let us know. But I got to leave it there. Darren Fisher, Michelle Rempel, Garner, and Don Davies, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. We got to take a short break, but I just want to say something to our viewers here, and I really appreciate the MPs.